Cheap, budget-friendly laptops look great on a price tag comparison, but the moment you try to run Photoshop, render a 3D scene, or drop into a modern game, the cheap parts start screaming. I've seen that disappointment play out on a handful of forums, where users end up returning the machine or plugging in an external GPU just to get by. That's why I wanted to see if the ASUS VivoBook Pro 16X feels like a smarter buy instead of another regret-laden shortcut. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The first thing I did was line up the specs against the real work I do, a mix of video editing, occasional game streaming, and a lot of multitasking with big Photoshop files. The headline numbers: an Intel Core i7-12650H, 32GB of LPDDR5 RAM, a 1TB PCI SSD, and an RTX 3050 look impressive on paper, but the proof is in how they behave when the laptop is actually sitting on a desk for 8 hours a day. Let's start with the display, because that's where the VivoBook Pro tries to set itself apart. It sports a 16-inch QUXGA panel with a 16:10 aspect ratio, which means you get a bit more vertical real estate than the typical 16:9 gaming laptop. In practice, that extra height is a silent productivity win. Timelines in Premiere Pro stretch further, code editors show more lines, and even when you're scrolling through long PDFs you need fewer scrolls. The colors are vivid enough for creative work, and the 120Hz refresh rate does make mouse movements feel smoother, though you'll notice the difference mostly in fast-paced games or while scrubbing video. For someone who splits time between creation and play, that hybrid feel is genuine value. Now the CPU and GPU combo. The i7-12650H is a 10-core beast that can turbo up to 4.7 GHz. In my day-to-day tests, compiling a medium-sized Unity project dropped from the 15-minute mark on an older i5 laptop to just under 9 minutes. The RTX 3050 Ti, while not a flagship, handles 1080p gaming at medium-high settings without choking, and it's certified as RTX Studio Ready, meaning Adobe's drivers are tuned for smoother rendering in Lightroom and After Effects. The real advantage shows up when you enable CUDA acceleration in Premiere, a 10-minute 4K export shaved off roughly 3 minutes compared to a similar spec machine that only has an integrated GPU. Memory and storage are where the VivoBook Pro feels generous. 32GB of LPDDR5 means you can keep 10 Chrome tabs open, a Photoshop file with dozens of layers, and a virtual machine running side by side without feeling the lag that cheaper 8 or 16GB rigs exhibit. The 1TB NVMe SSD is fast enough that I never saw the loading spinner linger longer than a second or two, even when moving massive video files around. What you don't see is a secondary M.2 slot. The laptop is sold as a single drive configuration, so if you ever need more space you'll have to rely on an external SSD or replace the existing drive, which isn't a deal breaker but is worth noting for long-term storage plans. One of the quirkiest, and surprisingly useful, features is the ASUS DialPad. It's a circular touchwheel tucked into the palm rest that can be assigned to scroll, zoom, or brush size in creative apps. In Photoshop, assigning the DialPad to brush hardness let me tweak details without taking my hand off the tablet, cutting down the time spent hunting for shortcuts. It's not a must-have, but for people who love tactile controls it adds a layer of workflow polish that you won't find on most mainstream laptops. Connectivity is another strong suit. With Thunderbolt 4, you can daisy-chain an external 4K monitor, a fast external SSD, and a dock without reaching for a separate hub. The HDMI 2.1 port also supports a single 4K display at 60 Hz, which is handy for a dual monitor setup without extra adapters. Two USB 3.2 Type-A ports cover the older peripherals, and a USB-C power delivery port lets you charge the laptop while you're using it, a small convenience that adds up over the course of a workday. Of course, no laptop is perfect. The first downside I noticed is weight. At roughly 2.3 kilograms, it's heavier than the ultra-thin Ultrabooks you see marketed for portability. If you're commuting daily and need something you can toss into a backpack without feeling the heft, you might still gravitate toward a lighter device and accept the trade-off in performance. The second practical weakness is thermals under sustained load. The VivoBook Pro's thin chassis means the fans spin up noticeably when you push the RTX 3050 Ti for long gaming sessions. You'll hear a whirring that can be a bit distracting in a quiet room. The laptop stays within safe temperature ranges, but you'll feel the throttling dip a few percent if you're trying to squeeze out every frame in a demanding title. Battery life is a mixed bag, as expected for a machine that balances creative workloads with gaming. In a typical office scenario, web browsing, email, a bit of video playback, I got about 7 hours, which is respectable for a 16-inch laptop.